I decided I'll do another story time video, but I'm gonna post this maybe a day later. I might even load it up in my little clip art thing so I can make it a little bit more interactive. I don't know, maybe. I want to talk about number munchers real quick. When I was writing the second book, was it the second book or the first? It might have been the first, but I think it was the second. I reached out because, okay, give you a little backdrop. Number Munchers was a game in the early 90s that we used to play. The first Number Munchers that I played was on like an actual floppy disk. It was the 5 1/4 disc. They were like these big discs, about this big, and when you could flop them. That's why they call them floppies. So you'd have a computer that was it was a keyboard, and it was a monitor, what they call a monochrome. So it was like green and black. The colors were green and black, and you load these floppies when you're getting ready to play a game, or whatever the case may be. They were using what they call MS-DOS at the time. This was way before mouses and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't in the 80s, but it was in the 90s. And we was probably in maybe second grade. Or we might have been in third grade. I was going to Ann Sullivan Communication School. Everybody could attest to this. Y'all remember those. So we put these little floppies in, and then you slam down the little floppy thing, and then it reads it. And then we played this game. There was 2 games that I remember of. One of the games was Number Munchers on that floppy. I can't remember. But there was a game where this little thing is running, and then you gotta press a button, like if it's a Y, or I think you gotta spell the word or whatever, and then it jumps over it. But I think there was another game. I think Number Munchers was one of them too. Number Munchers will ask you, okay, what are multiples of 6? Well, you know that 2 times 3 is 6. It might say, what are multiples of 8? So 2 times 4 is 8. So you could basically, you have a little green character, and it'll say something like, what are multiples of 60? Or something like that. And then you see a 10, and you run over there and you eat 10, and you eat another 10, and and so it was learning math. It was learning, but it was a game. And I believe that was on the first Macintosh that didn't have a mouse. It just had the 5 1/4 floppies. Then I think we came back to school like the next semester, or at some point in time, they upgraded. They got new computers. So they used what they call the LC2. This was the first time we used a mouse. So they had what I call a GUI, a graphical user interface. So you're not just typing at that time. Now you're dealing with a system where you're able to move the mouse and you can select stuff. So they showed us how to shut down and how to do all of these different things. So we started using, I think there was Number Munchers on there. There was something called Odell Lake. So you're like a fish, and it almost looked kind of 3D, but you're like a fish, and you got to kind of move around from the sharks, and you pick different fish, and you try to survive, and you'll eat other fish. So you'll try to survive in the water, in the ocean. So they had Odell Lake and Oregon Trail. Now, Oregon Trail was in those first computers from in that floppy disk. I could have sworn that 5 1/4 floppy disk before we were able to use the mouse, because there was no mouse with those computers, because I believe those were from the 80s. There was what they call Oregon Trail. That was a survival game. So you might have had to have a certain amount of food you take, your oxen. The weather could get bad, so let's say you can die because your oxen they didn't have enough food or the weather. It could have, they supplanted you with real life survival skills. Now, as the graphics improved with what they call the LC2 Macintosh, now that took a 3.14 floppy disk. They didn't call it 3 1/4. They called it 3.14. So it was about this big. A lot of the MPC 2000s took that floppy disk as well, where you could save beats and you could save audio files. Okay, so now, um, Odell Lake, Oregon Trail, and Number Munchers was on the LC2 computers, and you know how, I mean, Nintendo was that deal, but man, when Super Nintendo came out, you not breaking your neck to play the first Nintendo. You're still gonna play it maybe, but when Super Nintendo came out, Nintendo probably wasn't really making no old Nintendo games because the graphics were superior and the sound was super superior. You messing with Donkey Kong Country, Star Fox, Super Mario World. You messing with not Streets of Rage, but Final Fight, and I mean, Turtles in Time, and I mean, you really, that's an upgrade from the first 10 Ninja Turtles. Ninja Turtles Arcade was the only one you may want to play. I mean, you got Adventures of Batman and Robin on the new Super Nintendo. And Adventures of Batman and Robin on Sega Genesis was even better than the Super Nintendo. And Super Nintendo, if you ask me, had better graphics than Genesis. They were both 16-bit, but Super Nintendo compacted almost like 32-bit, so the graphics was a lot better. So, anyway, back to Number Munchers. I thought about Number Munchers, and I said, well, damn, I wonder how much it would cost and what it would take if I could try to obtain either the trademarks or some copyrights or something like that, so I could print up t-shirts. Because everybody remembers the Number Munchers. Now, I'm giving y'all a little bit of free game here, but I tried it. Man, when I finally reached out to whoever owned Number Munchers, they were not interested in doing business. I sent them an email, and, I was trying to do business. Like, okay, what does it take? How much you guys charge for copyright, trademark? They weren't looking to do business at that time, and I was kind of looking like, well, is it really something? Are they really still doing their thing? Do people even really mess with this Number Munchers like this? So I said, well, maybe I'll just try it again once I get my money up. They wasn't interested. So whoever owned it, it was a company, and I think I mentioned the name in my second book. I don't think it was my first. I can't remember, but I think it was my second book. That company, for some reason, they weren't interested in letting go of that. Maybe somebody, a family member or somebody in the state owned the copyright or whatever, and they basically just, but I was going to try to see if I could get a licensing thing. And that's why I wanted to make this story time for Number Munchers. So, shout out to Number Munchers, man. I mean, it was Number Munchers they need to put Number Munchers in. How am I going to use my words correctly here, YouTube? They need to have programs more like Number Munchers, rather than telling our kids, well, if you're a penguin, or if you feel like a penguin, you can just say you're a penguin. You know what I'm saying? They don't really need that. That's not reality. Reality is math, and reality is science. Hey, that's what they need to be teaching in schools. Not fantasy. That's not gonna help them. But anyway, that's my Number Muncher story. So, like I said, I'm gonna be getting this podcast up and ready in the next couple of days, and it's gonna be a treat. It's gonna be a lot of good information for y'all. So, I'm gonna holler at y'all.